They say a man's land is his pride. For me, it was much more than that. My land, my little driveway farm tucked into the rolling green fields of Lincoln County, wasn't just my pride, it was my life. It was the place where I planted my father's legacy, where my children grew up chasing chickens in the morning dew, and where every sunrise felt like a promise kept. But all it took was one petty neighbor and a few nosy county board members to try and take it all away. Not because I did anything wrong, but because they didn't know who I really was. They thought I was just a quiet old farmer at the edge of town, just a man with a muddy pickup and some goats. They had no idea I ran the whole damn county. All started one Friday morning. I was sipping my coffee, leaning against the post of my front porch, watching my farmhands unload some feed from the truck when I saw something odd. A shiny black SUV was parked just past the end of my driveway. It wasn't one of my regulars to clean, too new, Out of place, a woman in heels stepped out, clipboard in hand, sunglasses too big for her face. I knew right away, Inspector. Now, we get our fair share of surprise check-ins, but usually they call first. This one didn't. She walked with a purpose, stepping right up to my mailbox. Eyeing the gravel drive like it had committed a crime, I waited. Let her do her little performance. When she finally turned toward me, I walked over with a polite smile. "Morning," I said, tipping my hat. She didn't smile back. "Mr. Lawton?" she asked, scanning her sheet like she was checking me off some government list. "That's me," I nodded. "Can I help you with something?" Her lips tightened. "I'm here to investigate a zoning complaint. According to records, this driveway connects directly to county-maintained farmland, which is not authorized for commercial use." I raised an eyebrow. "Commercial use?" She gestured toward my barn, my trucks, my produce stand at the edge of the fence. "That over there is being used for retail. You're selling to the public. And that," she pointed back at the gravel, "is technically county access." Now, I'd heard rumblings before. Little gripes from a few locals who didn't like that I ran an open farm modelette. Customers walk the grounds, pick their own veggies, pet the goats, buy jams. But never anything like this. Never someone coming at me with legal nonsense. "Well," I said calmly, "this land's been in my family for 3 generations. That road was built by my grandfather, long before your county even had an access map, and as far as I know, no one's blocked it since." She didn't flinch. "Nevertheless, we've received an official complaint from residents in the adjacent subdivision. They're requesting that the driveway be gated and restricted, effective immediately, until the zoning dispute is resolved." That's when I knew, it wasn't about zoning. It wasn't about rules. It was personal. The subdivision next door had been a thorn in my side since it got built. Cookie-cutter homes, perfectly trimmed lawns, and neighbors who thought a rooster crowing at dawn was noise pollution. They didn't understand rural life. They came from the city, brought their HOA nonsense with them, and treated our land like an inconvenience. A few weeks back, I refused to lease a small parcel behind their homes for green space. They wanted to turn my pasture into a jogging trail. I told them no firmly. That must have stung. I looked back at the inspector. "So you're telling me," I said slowly, "that these new folks think they can shut down the main driveway to a working farm that's been here since 1943. She gave a rehearsed nod. "Until the matter is reviewed by the county zoning committee. Yes, you'll receive a written order within the week." I let the silence sit between us for a moment. "Ma'am," I said with a chuckle, "you ever wonder why there's a plaque with my name on the courthouse wall downtown?" She blinked. "That's because I helped build that committee," I said. "I sat on it for 12 years. Chaired it for 4. I probably wrote the bylaws you're quoting." The slightest crack appeared in her posture. "I also helped fund the latest agricultural expansion grant this county received," I added, "and every truck of produce that goes to the school district lunches comes from my fields." She glanced at her clipboard again, maybe looking for an update. Maybe realizing this wasn't going to be easy. "I'm not trying to be difficult, Mr. Lawton," she said, more softly. "But I have to file what I was sent, and I respect that," I said. "But you might want to tell whoever sent you that they just picked a fight with the wrong farmer." That night, I didn't sleep. I sat at my kitchen table, looking over old zoning maps, legal records, land deeds. My grandfather was a smart man. He never trusted politicians. He had kept every document, every permit, survey, title, and right. There in the old black filing cabinet was the original easement, signed in ink in 1954, granting my family's sole access to the drive, not the county. U.S. I smiled. They wanted to play games. I had the rulebook. Over the next few days, the tension grew. A couple of the neighbors from the subdivision started driving past real slow, cameras out, pretending to walk their dogs near the edge of my fence. One guy even threw a passive-aggressive note over my gate, telling me my scarecrow was offensive. I didn't even know how to respond to that. Then came the barricades. On a rainy Tuesday morning, I walked out to see 2 orange sawhorses, placed across the driveway entrance, no signage, no explanation, just there, blocking traffic. I called the sheriff. He came out fast. Good man. Said he had no record of a county order and personally moved the barricades with me. Said off the record, he thought this whole thing stank of HOA politics. But the message was clear. They weren't going to stop. I went to the next county board meeting. Didn't wear a suit. Just my boots, my flannel, and the same hat I wore too, every harvest. People stared. Some nodded with respect. Others whispered. That's when I noticed a few new faces at the back of the room, members from the subdivision HOA. Trying to blend in, I stepped up to the mic, cleared my throat, and spoke. My name is Eli Lawton. My family has farmed the south end of this county for nearly a century. We've fed the schools, donated to the food banks, hired dozens of local workers, and kept this land alive when others sold theirs off to developers. I paused, and now, a few newcomers who don't like the smell of manure think they can erase that history with a complaint form. There were murmurs. Some claps. The chair of the board nodded slightly. I pulled out the easement and held it up. This document proves that the driveway in question has never been county property. It was surveyed and assigned privately, 70 years ago. Any obstruction placed on it without my consent is, by law, trespassing. I laid it on the desk. And if this board can't defend one of its oldest landowners from harassment, then I suggest you prepare for a very public legal battle. The room was quiet. I stepped down, slow and calm. After the meeting, I received more than 20 calls from local farmers, shop owners, even school staff. Messages of support, offers to help. A local journalist asked for an interview. Apparently, someone had recorded my speech and posted it online. Within 24 hours, it had over 30,000 views. By the end of the week, the inspector sent a formal letter. The complaint had been dismissed. No further action would be taken. The driveway remained open. No fines. No zoning change. I thought that would be the end. But I was wrong, because what they tried to block wasn't just a driveway, it was a movement. A man who looked quiet but held the keys to more than just a farm. They had poked the wrong bear, and now, they were going to learn who really ran the county. You'd think after being shut down at the county board meeting, the HOA next door would have backed off, learned their lesson, maybe even taken the chance to start over and try living like neighbors. But no, some people, when they lose face, don't walk away. They dig in, and the folks from that fancy subdivision weren't done trying to make my life hell. The week after the complaint was dismissed, things went quiet for a bit. Too quiet. No slow driving cars. No one tossing notes over the fence. The silence wasn't peace, it was a setup. I could feel it. Then, it began. First, one of my delivery trucks was cited for unauthorized roadside parking while unloading at the school cafeteria route. We'd been running for years, without issue. Then, my roadside farm stand, the same little stall I'd built with my sons for weekend produce sales, was flagged by someone for code violations. The health department showed up asking questions. And then came the property tax audit request. Triggered conveniently by anonymous concern over whether I had properly declared the usage of my grain silos. It was too coordinated, too precise. That's when I realized the HOA wasn't working alone. They'd found sympathetic ears in the zoning office, maybe even the tax department. A few new hires over the past year, brought in through a community partnership initiative that included guests, representatives from that same suburban development. It was all a show. Smile at the farmers while tightening the noose behind their backs. I wasn't angry. Not yet. I was disappointed. I'd spent years serving this county, sitting on committees, donating my time, my equipment, even some of my land, to help the schools and roads get what they needed. I wasn't the only one. Dozens of old families around here did the same. That's how small counties stay alive, through sweat, dirt, and quiet generosity. But now, it was like that didn't matter, because the new folks had money. And with money came influence. But what they didn't have, what they would never have, was the heart of this county, the people. So I fought back. Not with lawsuits or press conferences, no, I knew something better. Community. I called up Maria at the diner, asked her if she'd host a farmers forum, informal, coffee and pie kind of gathering. She said yes without blinking. I made some calls, sent a few texts. The old phone tree lit up like Christmas. By the following Thursday, that diner was ranchers, mechanics, bakers, school teachers, even the librarian from 2 towns over. All of them had heard what was going on. All of them were ready. We sat elbow to elbow, the air thick with coffee and wood smoke. I stood up, cleared my throat, and told them everything from the driveway blockade to the sudden wave of inspections. They're not just coming after my farm, I said. They're testing how much of our county they can quietly take. And if they can do it to me, they can do it to any of us. That's when something clicked. People began sharing their own stories. A family down by the creek who'd been told to tear down their chicken coop because it didn't meet the visual standards of the subdivision nearby. A mechanic who had to repaint his garage after a noise complaint mysteriously turned into a zoning restriction. One man stood up and said, They want our land without buying it. They want us gone but silent. The room buzzed with that kind of righteous anger that doesn't explode, it organizes. By the end of the night, we had a plan. First, we created a public petition digitally and on paper. It demanded full transparency from the county offices about complaint sources and inspection justifications. We used local churches, farm stands, school events, any place with a bulletin board. Within 3 days, we had over 1,100 signatures. Next, we gathered our receipts, photos of our properties, proof of long-standing operations, signed letters from school boards, food banks, and local businesses vouching for the value our farms brought to the community. But the best move, we turned the public narrative. A young journalism student named Caleb, whose parents ran a dairy farm, offered to help. He created a video, a mini documentary, interviewed farmers, local workers, teachers, told the story of how landowners like me weren't obstacles to progress, we were the progress. How the county's history, economy, and soul were tied to our fields, not HOA bylaws. That video went viral. It hit 50,000 views in a week. Even state-level media picked it up. Suddenly, the story wasn't about a zoning complaint. It was about old rural towns fighting back against creeping gentrification. David versus Goliath. That's when the HOA cracked. They released a public statement, trying to walk back their efforts, claimed they'd only raised environmental concerns, said they wanted peaceful coexistence. But it was too late. Everyone knew what they'd tried. And now, they were the ones on the defensive. But they had one last card to play, and it was the dirtiest of them all. Late one night, I got a call from my farmhand Luis. He was shouting over the wind, "Boss, come quick, fire." I jumped in my truck, tires spinning down the gravel. By the time I reached the barn, the east wall was burning. Not a big fire, but enough to blacken the wood and ruin some equipment. We put it out fast. No one hurt, but the smell of smoke clung to everything. The fire marshal said it looked like someone had thrown a lit rag soaked in gas through a broken window. Arson. There were no cameras on that side. Nothing to prove anything, but I didn't need proof to know what message they were sending. You speak too loud, and you get burned, but I didn't scare easy. Neither did my neighbors. The very next morning, 20 men showed up at the farm with tools. They rebuilt that side of the barn by dusk. The church sent pies, the school sent letters. Local businesses started offering discounts to farms and workers with verified affiliations. A wave of solidarity, unlike anything I'd ever seen. Weekend, I got a call from a county commissioner, one of the newer ones, who hadn't said much before. He cleared his throat. "Mr. Lawton, I think it's time we talked." I told him I'd be waiting, because now, the tide had turned, and everyone knew it. The commissioner's call had been polite, careful, the kind of tone people use when they realize they might have backed the wrong horse. He said he wanted to ease the tension between the farmers and the board. Said the county didn't want unnecessary escalation, but the words were hollow, dressed in official politeness. I knew what he really meant. The board was losing control of the narrative and, now they were worried that. I told him what I tell anyone who calls me after the damage is already done. Show up, in person, then we'll talk. And he did. 2 days later, he parked his sleek little hybrid next to my battered Ford and walked through the mud in city shoes that didn't belong in a place like mine. I greeted him on the porch. Luis handed him a coffee black, no sugar, and we sat down under the morning sun. My dogs flopped at our feet like they'd been waiting for a show. He asked about the fire. I told him the truth. No cameras, no charges. But the message was clear, and that I wasn't afraid of fire. My grandfather had rebuilt this place after the flood of '58 with bare hands and wet lumber. I wasn't backing down over some scorched boards. He nodded, avoiding eye contact, like someone realizing they were talking to a much older problem than they'd expected. Then he made the offer. "We'd like you to consider attending the next county board meeting, in an official capacity." I let that hang in the air. "You mean as a guest?" I asked slowly. He cleared his throat. "We have an opening on the agricultural committee. One of the appointees is stepping down. The board believes your voice might help restore confidence among rural constituents." Now that was funny. Because for years, we were ignored, barely consulted when policy changed, called in only when budgets needed balancing. But now, when the farmers got loud, when we reminded them who put the food on the table, they wanted us back at the table under their terms. Still, I didn't say no. I said I'd consider it, because sometimes the best way to protect your land is to walk into the lion's den and remind the lions who built the cage. That week, I got calls from neighbors, farmers, even a few reporters. Everyone wanted to know, was I really going back into the boardroom? I hadn't served in an official capacity in over 5 years, left politics behind to focus on the land. But when you're pushed hard enough, the soil starts to speak. And mine was whispering something loud and clear. They needed me back in that room. The night of the meeting, the boardroom was packed, not just with suits and clipboards, but with the people, ranchers in denim, mothers with aprons, old men with sun-leathered hands and strong opinions. The crowd had never looked more real. I stood near the back. At first, I didn't want to make a grand entrance. Let the agenda tick forward. Eminence read. Motions moved. Formalities mumbled. Then they reached the item titled, Review of Zoning Protocol Adjustments. Here it came. That's when the board chair, an older woman named Susan, whom I'd known for years, looked up and said, Before we begin this item, I'd like to welcome Mr. Eli Lawton, who will be joining the Agricultural Committee pending a final vote. Mr. Lawton, would you care to address the board? I walked slowly to the front. Every eye followed. The room got quiet. I looked at them, the board members, the folks from the subdivision, sitting stiff in the second row. Then, I looked at my neighbors. Some nodded, some smiled, some just looked tired. I took a deep breath. When my grandfather settled this land, there weren't any zoning boards. There weren't complaints about how tall a barn was, or whether a rooster crowed too loud. There was just land, sweat, and the hope that if you worked it hard enough, it would feed your family. And it did. It fed a lot more than just us. I paused. I came here tonight not to complain, and not to threaten, but to remind this board of something we all seem to have forgotten. The roots of this county are not buried under asphalt and sidewalks. They're here on the farms, in the fields, in the dirt, under our boots. And if you rip those roots up to make room for comfort and complaints, then don't be surprised when the whole thing collapses. I looked at the zoning director, young, fresh-faced, probably never baled hay a day in his life. You tried to silence me. With bureaucracy, with inspections, with whispers, but you forgot something. I turned to the crowd. I don't need a title to be heard. I've got this. I held up my hand, calloused, rough, real. This is what built the county, and this is what will protect it. The room erupted. Applause, whistles, a few shouts of, that's right, echoing from the back. Susan, to her credit, let it happen. Then she smiled, tapped the gavel lightly, and said, let's vote. The motion passed unanimously. I was now officially back on the board, but more than that, I was back in the fight, of course. The HOA didn't take it well. The very next day, a neighborhood alert went out to all residents of the subdivision, full of vague warnings about increased agricultural activity and potential health concerns from unregulated livestock. They warned people to avoid trespassing onto adjacent properties, which was code for don't go near place. Then came the social media posts, anonymous accounts claiming my goats carried disease, that my fields used banned pesticides, that my family had ties to militia groups. Laughable, but dangerous, because in today's world, lies travel faster than truth. I didn't respond. Not online. Not publicly. I didn't need to, because my neighbors did it for me. A schoolteacher posted a photo of the fresh veggies her class used in a nutrition lesson from my farm. A pastor wrote about how I donated meat and produce every year to the local shelter. A mother shared pictures of her autistic son gently petting one of my lambs. His face lit with joy. Truth began to outshine the lies. That's when something incredible happened. I got a letter from a teenager, handwritten, said his name was Malik, lived in the subdivision. His parents had moved from the city and warned him not to talk to the farmer next door, but he'd been watching, heard what I said at the meeting, saw how people rallied around the farm. He wrote, you remind me of the kind of man I want to be, one day. Strong, kind, not afraid. I cried reading that. Because that's what they didn't understand. This fight, it wasn't about a driveway, or a gate, or zoning. It was about identity, about standing tall when others want you small, about refusing to be erased from your own story. I framed that letter, put it next to my father's photo in the barn office. I kept showing up. Every board meeting, every forum. Every vote. I studied every new proposal, challenged language that allowed vague enforcement, protected rural pathways, pushed for clearer protections for farm stands, roadside vendors, and small landholders. Little by little, things changed. Not fast, not flashy, but real. The board started listening. The newer commissioners began consulting us before they proposed anything. Respecters backed off. The HOA stopped sending reps to meetings. The complaints slowed, but I wasn't naive. I knew they'd be back. Maybe not tomorrow, maybe not next year, but someday. So I kept building, not just my farm, my community. I started a mentoring circle, young folks who wanted to learn the land. Kids from both sides of the fence, rural and suburban. We planted together, cleaned the old trail near the creek, talked about what it meant to belong somewhere. It was messy, beautiful, exactly how a county should be. The strange thing about power is that people usually only recognize it once they try and fail to take it from you. That's what happened out here. First, they tried to block my driveway. Then they tried to break my spirit. And when none of that worked, they did the only thing left. They started asking me for advice. It started with a call from a woman named Karen, not the cliché type, mind you. She was newly elected president of the same HOA that had caused me months of grief. She asked, cautiously, if I'd be open to sharing insight about how to better align community goals between farmers and residents. I almost laughed. It took everything in me not to say what I was thinking, but instead, I took a deep breath and asked her one question. Are you actually listening this time, or just trying to save face? To her credit, she was honest. Both, and that, oddly enough, was the beginning of something unexpected. Invited her out to the farm, not for a meeting, not for a photo op, but for a day of real work. She showed up in jeans and sneakers, hair tied back, ready to get dirty. I handed her a rake and pointed her toward a patch of overgrown weeds near the fence line. No speeches, no lectures, just sweat, sunshine, and the quiet hum of country life. By mid-afternoon her hands were blistered, but her face had softened. She looked out over the pasture, goats milling about, kids playing tag near the old tractor, and she said, "I didn't know it was like this." I thought, I don't know what I thought. That's the problem, I told her. Most people think they understand until they're knee-deep in the mud. It's easy to fear what you've never touched. She nodded, silent. From there, something shifted. She went back to her board and pushed for a new policy, one that required HOA members to attend at least one local farm tour a year. Optional at first, then encouraged. It wasn't revolutionary, but it was a start, a bridge. Meanwhile, on the county side, things were settling into a new rhythm. I wasn't just sitting in meetings anymore, I was shaping them, helping draft new protections for rural access roads, simplifying the process for small-scale agricultural permits, pushing back on and I wasn't alone. Other farmers, inspired by the noise we'd made, stepped up too. We formed a rural advisory council. Voluntary, no politics, just local folks keeping each other informed and involved. And the best part, young people were joining. Students who used to roll their eyes at old man politics were showing up, asking smart questions, bringing energy. Malik, the kid who wrote me that letter, he came every month, sat in the front, took notes like it was gospel. One day after a meeting, he asked me, "Why didn't you run for office again?" I smiled, "Because I'm doing more good out here than I ever did behind a desk." He nodded, but I could see it in his eyes. He was thinking about running. Maybe not now, maybe not for years, but the idea had been planted, and that's the real win. Because this fight, this whole messy, drawn-out fight, wasn't just about me or my farm. It was about what kind of county we're going to be when none of us are here anymore. When the names on the mailboxes change and the tractors are electric and the fields grow crops we haven't even imagined yet. Will we still protect what matters? Will we still stand up when someone tries to shut us down? I hope so, because the truth is, this county runs through my veins, but it doesn't belong to me. It belongs to everyone willing to fight for it. The last surprise came in the spring. The same zoning inspector who'd first shown up on my property. The woman with the clipboard and the sunglasses, she came back. Only this time, she wasn't alone. She brought a group of new recruits from the office, told me they were updating their training, that they wanted future inspectors to understand how policies affect real people, not just lines on a map. I said I'd help, on one condition, that each of them spend one full day working with a farmer before they ever write a citation. She agreed. That summer, we had young zoning officers digging ditches, hauling feed, and collecting eggs right alongside my crew. Some of them were clumsy. A few even fainted in the heat, but when they left, they understood, not just the work, but the pride. That's how change happens. Not with rules, not with protests, but with understanding. With blistered hands and tired smiles and the realization that we're all just trying to live a decent life without being stepped on. One evening, near the end of the season, I stood at the edge of my field, watching the sun melt into the hills. The kids had gone home, the barn was quiet, and the gravel driveway that had once sparked a war now looked so peaceful, so ordinary, that I almost laughed. Funny. I thought, how a simple stretch of dirt could become a battlefield. But I wouldn't change a thing, because that fight made us stronger. It reminded us who we are. It pulled neighbors out of silence and brought strangers together with pitchforks and petitions. It proved that legacy isn't just something you inherit, something you defend. And in the end, when the dust settled, it wasn't me who won, it was all of us, the farmers, the teachers, the kids, even the former critics who finally saw the truth. So now, when people ask me what do you do, I don't say I run a farm. I say I help run a county, not with power or titles or money, but with roots. And when they ask me if it was worth it, the fights, the late nights, the smear campaigns, I tell them this: it's always worth it to stand your ground when the ground means something, especially when it's yours.